So we are starting off with a chicken taco soup. Y'all, this recipe is so easy and so filling and really, really good. I'm starting with some olive oil and onion. I just chopped it up and let it saute for a little bit. And then I'm dumping 2 cans of corn and 2 cans of black beans into my colander so I can get those rinsed off and ready to go into the pot. Now I'm going to add in a can of diced tomatoes with green chilies. This is one of my favorite things to keep on hand because it just adds a lot of flavor. And then I'm also adding in a small can of tomato sauce and about a 14-ounce can of diced tomato. You can add whatever tomato products you have on hand or whichever ones you like the best. There really is like no right or wrong way to do the tomato part of it. And then I'm adding in the rinsed corn and black beans. And now we just need to turn it into a soup. So I'm adding 3 cans of water. I just use one of the cans from the corn. And then we're gonna go ahead and season up the soup. So I added some Sazón, some garlic powder, onion powder, and cumin, of course, because this is a Mexican style soup, and then also some pepper. And now to add even more seasoning, I'm adding in a packet of taco seasoning. And we're just gonna give that a mix. And now I'm taking a rotisserie chicken. This is definitely a shortcut that you can take. Just go ahead and get a rotisserie chicken. If you happen to live near an Amazon Fresh and you've watched my videos before, then you know that the Amazon Fresh chickens are really, really good. So yeah, at first I was gonna chop it, but then I was like, you know what, let me just shred it with my fingers. So I did that. And I used every part of the chicken except the legs and wings. I'm not going to add the chicken in right away because it's already cooked. So I'm allowing the soup to simmer. And while it's doing that, I have a baguette from Trader Joe's. So I'm just going to go ahead and slice a piece off and then slice it in half the long way, just so that, of course, we can make some garlic cheese bread. And this is also super easy to do. So the first thing you want to do is spread some butter on your bread, a thin layer. You don't want to do too much because then it'll just be like really oily. And then once you're done with that, the next thing you want to do is take some minced garlic and spread some of that on there as well. Again, a thin layer. You can do as much or as little as you want. It's up to you how much garlic flavor you want to put on it. And that's the nice thing about making it yourself. You can kind of control how much of each thing is on there. And then I'm just popping this onto my air fryer tray and I'm going to stick it in the air fryer. And I realized on the second day that this is unnecessary, but I did go ahead and put it into the air fryer and start the cooking process at 350. And while that was going, I went ahead and added the chicken to the soup because now the soup is pretty much done. So I'm going to go ahead and add in that chicken, and I'm cutting it off at this point because you really do not need to cook the chicken. The chicken's already cooked and you don't want to overcook it and make it tough. So yeah, I added in the chicken and then I cut the heat. And now that the chicken is in, our soup is completely done. I don't think it gets much easier than that, you guys. So easy for a meal prep, and this will feed you for days. So yeah, I'm pulling out my bread now that it's a little bit toasty, and I'm gonna go ahead and add the cheese. You could stop at this step. You could just do garlic bread, but I wanted like a cheesy garlic bread, so I went ahead and did some cheddar and mozzarella. But what I was saying earlier about not having to do it in 2 steps is you can go ahead and spread your butter and garlic and then add your cheese all at once and pop that into the air fryer because it doesn't need to cook separately. So on day 2 I did that way and it actually came out better than on day 1 because it was just a little bit crispy. It was still really good though and crusty, which made it really good to dip into the soup. But I'm just saying that it's unnecessary. But if you do want it cooked a little bit longer but you don't want to burn the cheese, you can do it the way I did it just then. I got a bowl of the soup. I went ahead and added some cilantro to the top of it, and that completed our meal. So of course for meal prep, you want to go ahead and get this into your meal prep container. If you don't have these containers, then go ahead and click the link below to grab yourself some. These containers are so good. They're airtight, they keep the food from leaking, they're glass, so you don't have to worry about any staining or anything like that. They have a great seal. They're just a really good investment, and they're not even that expensive. So I would definitely highly recommend these containers if you haven't already picked them up. So just go ahead and throw your container with your soup into the fridge, and you have your meal for the next few days ready to go. And then when you're ready to eat, all you got to do is pull it out of the fridge and take the top off, because you don't want to microwave the plastic lid, but just take your soup, pop it into the microwave for a couple minutes, and your lunch or dinner is ready. Next up is a sausage, potato, and kale soup. And if you are a fan of Olive Garden, you've probably had this before. This was my favorite soup at Olive Garden, but they call it a zuppa toscana. So I'm starting with some sausage. I'm using the Italian pork sausage roll from Aldi. And I'm just gonna get that into a pan and start to brown it. And while that's happening, I just went ahead and peeled and sliced some potatoes. This is how they do it at Olive Garden. They slice their potatoes, but you could definitely cut them into whatever shape you like. If you want to dice them, that's fine too, or chop them, whatever you like. And now we're gonna go in with some kale. So I just went ahead and rinsed it and cleaned it really well. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and start adding it into my cooked sausage. I'm gonna let the oil from the sausage kind of coat the kale. I'm not adding any oil to this other than the oil that was already in the sausage. So yeah, I'm adding in the kale, and then I'm gonna just break it down into smaller pieces. That's optional, you don't have to do that. But I'm also removing the large stems because I just don't want any really fibrous pieces in there. So yeah, now that I got all the kale in, I'm just stirring that to kind of wilt it down. And this might seem a little bit random, but if for some reason you are not a meat eater, I have a vegan recipe for this already on my channel. So look up in the right hand corner of the screen and you'll see a card right now for that video. And now I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of flour, and I thought that this would be enough to bind the soup together and keep us from needing more flour than that. I thought that that would be enough, but in the end it was not. So just stay tuned. I was building this soup and kind of going with it. I didn't really have a recipe worked out in my mind yet. So I added a half cup of half and half, and then I ended up adding 3 half cups or a cup and a half of milk. And then I started adding in some chicken broth. And honestly, I do not feel like you need chicken broth. I feel like if you're really better off with chicken bouillon and water. I don't feel like chicken broth or chicken stock add a whole lot of flavor. So then I started adding in water, and all the measurements will be down below. But I put everything in half cup measurements. So you can kind of count along with me too. And then I started adding in my potatoes, and I probably added about 1.5 pounds or 1.75 pounds of potatoes. So I went ahead and started to stir it, and I realized that I didn't think there was going to be enough liquid. So I just kept adding more half and half and more water until I got to kind of the ratio of liquid to potatoes, because remember, we need enough liquid in this soup to cook the potatoes, and so that it's not turning into like a really thick consistency. And now I'm going to start seasoning it. So I got a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of garlic powder, and 1.5 teaspoons of onion powder. I ended up doing about a full teaspoon of Italian seasoning and about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. Gave that a stir, and then I also tasted it at this point to see what else it needed. And like I said, if you have chicken bouillon, this is the place to use it, because it's going to add a ton of flavor and you won't need to add as many other seasonings. But I didn't have any, so I went ahead and added some more seasoning. And this is the garlic and herb Kingsford seasoning, and as you guys can see, it's made by Badia. And that, I know some of you guys who have been here for a minute, y'all know I love that Badia complete seasoning. And that's because it just adds so much good flavor. So if you have some complete seasoning, this is the place to use that as well. There's really no bad place to use that. But yeah, I just started stirring it, made sure everything was well incorporated. I tasted it again to make sure I liked the flavor, and then popped the lid on so that it could cook. And then once it started boiling, I just turned the heat down so it wouldn't boil over. If you get these milk solids like this, let me show you what to do to fix it, just so that your soup is not like, you don't have a lot of this milk fat floating on top. We're gonna make a slurry and then put that in. Let me show you how to do it. So I went ahead and drizzled it in while I was stirring, just to make sure that it doesn't turn into like a dough inside the soup. And literally that is it. You can make a roux to thicken your soup up and to just kind of bring everything together. I'm sorry, not a roux. You can make a slurry to thicken your soup up and bring everything together, and that should prevent the separation of like the milk solids, so that you don't get this going on. Or if you notice that that's starting to happen, this is how you fix it.